with you.
Terrific. Thanks for being with us and
Sure.
jumping in. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Set in Education. It's 1:35 on Friday, April 9th. We are going to start our work today by addressing a letter that we all received from the co-chairs of the Social Equity Caucus. We have Representative Christie with us. Great to see you, Representative. No need to unmute yet, but you're welcome to. We also have Ledge Counsel, Jen Carby, with us. And I'm sure by now everyone's had an opportunity to review the letter. And what I've asked Ms. Carby to do is come in and just before we hear from Representative Christie, talk to us a little bit about process with regard to gubernatorial confirmations of this level, gubernatorial confirmations in general. We understand from press accounts that the two new appointees to the State Board of Education have been sworn in. I don't suspect that's anything unusual. I suspect that those kinds of things, that's usually the course of events. We're working on Secretary French, for example, his confirmation. I suspect he's been sworn in, and if something were to interrupt his serving, then we would act at that point, depending on a committee decision. But Ms. Carby, if you wouldn't mind just talking to us a little bit about this kind of thing and letting us know our options now. The short of it is 2 members have been put forward by the governor for confirmation to the State Board of Education. We'll hear from Representative Christie on the Social Equity Committee's concern about the lack of diversity on the board. I think and then we'll have a committee discussion on what we can and should and might be interested in doing.
Sure. Good afternoon, Jennifer Carby from Legislative Council. So there are a couple of statutes that relate specifically to the question that you're talking about, which, as I understand it, is should members who have been recently appointed to the State Board of Education be serving prior to their confirmation by the Senate? So in 16 VSA section 161, which is the State Board of Education, the appointment of members, their terms and vacancy, the language says that all members are appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. And then it goes on in subdivision 2 to say, in the event of any vacancy occurring in the membership of the board, and it's my understanding that these individuals were appointed to fill vacancies, that the governor shall fill the vacancy with a qualified person whose appointment shall be for the unexpired term. Those are sort of the relevant provisions there. And then we have another statute in Title 3 VSA section 257, that relates to appointments and vacancies requiring advice and consent of the Senate. And subsection B of that, which is the part that's applicable here, says that when a vacancy occurs in an office requiring appointment with the advice and consent of the Senate, an appointment may be made to fill the vacancy. If the appointment to fill the vacancy is made during any adjournment of the General Assembly, which is not the current situation, but it allows the person to validly serve the function during adjournment until the Senate convenes and acts on the appointment. If the appointment is made to fill the vacancy is made during any session of the General Assembly, which is the case, you are currently in session, the person appointed may validly function in that office until the Senate shall act upon the appointment submitted forthwith by the governor. And thereafter, the appointee shall continue in office if the Senate consents to the appointment. So what I understand from that language is that it sounds like the normal process has been followed here, and that an appointment was made or 2 appointments were made to fill vacancies. The Senate has not yet weighed in to consent or to disapprove of those appointments. And so the individuals are validly serving in those roles, subject to either confirmation or disapproval of the appointment by the Senate. So at this point, the Senate has not given its consent, and that is permissible under the statute.
Any questions, committee? Senator Perschlick.
Chair, do you want to take questions now or after Representative Christie?
I think it would be fine if anybody had any questions specifically regarding what Ms. Carby outlined. Anything directly there would be fine.
My question is sort of, is advice and consent defined anyway? Because it seems like it could mean a lot or it could mean nothing. Because I know there's been commissioners that they get appointed and they're supposed to be under the advice and consent of the Senate, and they never get confirmed, but they just serve, they get served for 8-10 years without confirmation. And I guess also, can you let me know, Ms. Carvey, if the Senate doesn't confirm an appointment, either to a board or to, to head up an agency, or no, not if they don't do it, but if we specifically say vote no, could the governor just reappoint them the next day? I mean, there isn't kind of like, what is our ability, I guess, is kind of the root of my question, to affect these.
Right. So I will confess this is not my area of expertise. Health law is, but that said, I think this issue I've heard this issue come up before, because I think there have been similar questions even among appointees in the health areas. What is sort of the effect if the Senate does not approve? Can the governor reappoint? I think there are some statutes that say if somebody is not, the governor does not, or the Senate does not consent, the governor shall not reappoint. But I think you sort of end up in a loop. I'm not sure it's especially effective for a governor from a practical standpoint to keep appointing somebody that the Senate keeps refusing to confirm, because that's never going to stop. I think it's from a practical standpoint makes more sense to appoint someone that the Senate is more likely to approve. You may want to hear from Secretary Bloomer. I think he certainly has experience advising the Senate on your advice and consent process, and may be the best subject matter expert to give you guidance on the scope of your role.
Senator Lyons.
Yep. So yep. So I guess my question really is about the current appointments, and whether or not there are any qualifying conditions for being appointed to the board. So in statute.
So you're looking to know what the requirements are to be a member of the state board?
Yes. So, so for example, when we make appointments to the Green Mountain Care Board, there are, there may be some requirements. So I'm wondering if there are any, and if there aren't, maybe that's a place where we should absolutely be looking. That's one. And then the other one, I was going to ask the same question that Senator Perchlik asked about what constitutes advice. So it's not a priori advice. We're not sending names in as some happen, but just some thoughts on that.
Right. I think from the way it plays out in practice, it's really more the consent side than the advice part. But yes, there are some qualifications in the existing statute. In that same statute, 16 VSA 161, as I think there are 10 members. 2 of them are secondary students. And then it gives some criteria in the appointment of the non-student members. It says priority shall be given to the selection of persons with a demonstrated commitment to ensuring quality education for Vermont students. And to the extent possible, the members shall represent geographically diverse areas of the state. So those are the current requirements or qualifications.
Would you repeat that again? So 2 students of the 10.
Right. 2 of the 10 are students. Mm-hmm. And then for the non-students, so the other 8, priority. So it talks about in terms of priority shall be given to the selection of persons with a demonstrated commitment to ensuring quality education for Vermont students. And then it says, to the extent possible, the members shall represent geographically diverse areas of the state.
Thank you. Senator Hooker.
So I'm just wondering about the appointments. Now, I'm looking at the list, and it looks as if the appointments were made in February. And I'm assuming that these were appointments to seats that were being vacated, whose the terms were up. do we have any idea? Like, I have no idea if that was the case or if somebody just left. And in that case, these two that have been newly appointed have 6-year terms. So I'm curious to know what happens when someone leaves in the middle of a term. Do they just fill out that term, and then do they have to be approved and confirmed? And in this case, they're going for a whole term.
Well,
So,
my understanding of these was that they were to fill vacancies.
So people that left midway.
People that left. That's the way right. So,
Okay.
now that may not be the case. There may be others who have more information. That's the way it has been described. And so I was focusing in on the vacancy language in the statutes.
okay.
And that in that case, the governor fills the vacancy with a qualified person, and their appointment is for the unexpired portion, the remainder of the term.
Okay. Well, that may be that these two seats expired in 2027.
So when I'm sorry, Senator Hooker, did you have another question?
No, that's all. Thank you.
So when a Senate committee or the Senate is, what are the options that committees in the Senate in general have around gubernatorial appointments? I mean, we just had a conversation with Secretary French. It was his public confirmation hearing. Our intention is to vote next week. I understand it would be people are in favor by a majority or against. If we don't get a majority in the committee, it doesn't go to the floor. Same kind of process with the state board.
I'm not sure that's quite accurate, because I think in general, the Senate typically acts on all appointments,
Okay.
but it's either to make a recommendation to the full Senate to confirm or not to confirm.
Okay.
But again, you may want to hear from Secretary Bloomer.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful. Anything else that you think we should know at this point, Ms. Carby, as it relates to options, background information, anything else?
I don't believe so. I mean, I certainly, it seems from the language of the existing statute and the qualifications that are in there now, there's certainly room for you to make additional provisions if that was something that the committee was interested in doing. So, I think you could take action if you wanted or not.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Representative Christie. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. Representative Christie and I used to serve in the House together, and I know he is well known in the Assembly. We do have two new senators. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to connect with Senators Chittenden or Terenzini yet, but hopefully if you haven't, you will sometime soon. So Representative Christie, what we would like you to do, if you'd be so kind as to take us through a little bit. You don't need to read the letter, of course, from the Social Equity Caucus, but take us through it a bit and maybe talk to us a little bit about what your concerns and what you would like this committee to consider or do.
Well, first off, let me say it's great to see you, I almost brought you back to the House.
That's more than fine. There are some people on this committee who would like me to go there, I bet.
Well, I know I didn't.
No, not at all.
But it's an honor to be here with you guys today. And let me start by saying I know both of the appointees. That's the scary part, when you spend, this much time in Vermont, especially in the area that I have being education, you get to know all the players. So I've known Lyle. Actually, I was Lyle's mentor. That's a scary thought. When he was the tech center director at Stafford. And Tom, as you know, as the counsel and attorney for VSAG as well. So very competent, individuals, and, a credit to education. That's not the concern with the appointees. It's more about process and intentionality. As important as equity and inclusion is, especially in education today, the concern around including more of the affected populations, on the board from a representation perspective, becomes critical. And we missed an opportunity, basically, and especially in this particular appointment, we do know that there have been folks that have been interested, in serving, that would broaden the perspective of the state board, and come with some strong credentials as well. But I guess to Senator Campion's question about what would we, want to do, to kind of cut to the chase at this point in time, is maybe an outcome, of this, could be a discussion, at your committee level around, would we want to change part of the criteria in the future selection to be more inclusive? And that's something well within our purview, as lawmakers and policy folks to do. I think I can speak comfortably saying that I don't think anybody intentionally, wants to, exclude. But the pandemic especially has shown, where there is so much more of a need, for the affected communities that have gone, without support. And it isn't always about, financial support. Sometimes representation of an affected community can make a major difference in how we approach, our delivery, of a particular service, as the state. And so I guess that would be my overarching thought, about potential next steps. If we want to get into our systems piece, you look at the design, advise and consent. It's set up to be done in February. And it gives us collectively, primarily the Senate, the opportunity to have February, March, April, and that first part of May to do the confirmations necessary during that time. And then there are provisions for when we're not in session. But when we're in session, you would hope that the most critical positions would rise right to the top. I think we've gotten a little lax, not necessarily this, I shouldn't place, blame, but I think it's become more mechanical. Well, if they're good people, they're not, they're good candidates. Let's just move this process, and I think that's what happened. And, there's not a lot we can do to correct other than looking at how we can be more intentional in the future.
I appreciate that very much. And I think you raised great points. And it sounds like you would be interested in partnering with us to work on the statute to again, make it require that it take in more considerations and be more diverse and more inclusive. And we would, I think, welcome your partnership on that. Questions for Representative Christie? Senator Persnick, please.
Yeah, thanks, Representative Christie, for being here and for the work of the Social Equity Caucus. That I don't know, you probably haven't had the time to do this, but I wonder if you know of any language that we might look at for other boards on how to address, going forward, so that we don't make the same mistake again or don't miss the opportunity, as you said. That, I'm sure if other people have already struggled with this and found a good way to word it, then that would make our jobs a lot easier.
Well, because this is, let's say, new ground, so to speak, Senator. That's exactly what it is. But I think that our Ledge Council staff has been very actively involved in language throughout all of our legislation around equity and inclusion. So I think we're fortunate to have, the folks we have. And I think that if we posed the question and started with the concept, they'd raise the bar with us very well, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Coach. Representative Christie, this is really, it's so important. And it's not just in this committee, but every committee. Obviously, we know that. And so while you're thinking about this, and it is to improve equity, inclusion, diversity within the educational environment in boards, and probably of all the places really belongs here, doesn't it? Yeah, I think so. Well, when I think about it's one thing to say, to provide for a diverse organization and diversity based on race, ethnicity, gender, however it's worded. But I think it's important to have that. So then you also were talking about the credentials of folks. And so what would you add in about credentials? And I'm separating those two things out. Because I don't know if there's any, it's just, if you have an interest in education, that is just about everybody in this state.
Exactly.
Yeah, it drives me nuts sometimes. Sorry.
Well, I think, without excluding someone who could very well be the next, future leader in education, but might not have a specific credential. I think that was the intention originally in the wording, was, to do that. When I step back and look at our options, it is truly a case by case, situation. You wouldn't want to create an environment where people didn't feel that they could add to, the process. Having some experience, let's say at a school board level, for example. That's trial by fire.
Yeah, no, we don't want to do that.
You know,
Yeah.
but the point being, that um, there are certain positions, a past teacher, any number of different pieces, give a potential candidate um, uh, that connectivity to the work. And but we don't know, um, to codify it.
I
Thank
think it's a
you.
great question, and I think
Mm,
I don't know if we have the Senator Lyons' question point is I think a very good one. I don't know if we have the time this year to look at credentialing, finish it, but I for one think it should be considered, and but I do think perhaps we do have the time to really look at the issue of diversifying the board, and maybe we have the time to do both. But I think our priority would be to diversify and get language in there that again would send the message that we are looking for a board that is representative of the state and what we want the state to be.
mhm.
So,
As um, all of the members, we passed Act One,
Mhm.
and what that means is we're saying that it's important.
Right.
Okay, that's a major piece of legislation that not every state in the country has even made. There's only like 3 states that have gone to that length of identifying how important this is. So, it's clear where our thoughts and intentions and as a state are. So it would be just taking the next step, Senator. I think.
Senator Lyons, did you have a follow-up?
no, I just thinking about how to avoid the issue around political appointments and
Yeah.
ensuring that when someone appears who is well qualified and offers diversity, that person is chosen. And what do we know about the list of people who show up? I mean, there's a whole lot of questions embedded in the whole process.
Yeah.
And I think Representative Christie's early point is a really very good one. Sometimes we in the Senate, let me put it this way, I think this committee needs to hear from those that are appointed to the state board. It warrants, it's a board that warrants having those individuals in, having them go through a process, having them talk to us about their interests and why they want to be on the board. And I think that's an important next step that we should advance. Any other questions for Representative Christie? Representative Christie, do you have any final words for us? It sounds as though we are in a place where we your comfort level and your interest would be going forward, if you will, not going back, but going forward. We'll have the 2 nominees in to talk to them, but your interest is again in moving forward as it relates to diversifying the board going forward. Okay.
Well, I guess, and this is, and I think know me well enough to know it's progress, not perfection.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that being said, we have an opportunity, and I say that the collective we, you as our agents in the Senate, when you visit with these folks and talk to them about your vision for education in Vermont and their vision, your equity lens that you're using now will be very clear to them that they need to embody as well. And you know, so that's the opportunity piece, I think, in all of this.
Yeah. Okay.
And I do appreciate, you know, the work, knowing full well, you know, you know, we're all there. I very, if I had a dream, it would be a tool that we could all use. It's almost like Senator Lyons' glasses, you know, a lens that we could all look through and go, this is what we want education in Vermont to look like. Or if it's the judiciary, this is what we want our laws to look like, you know. But to be able to look through our glasses and see how important equity and inclusion is to everything we do. It's the air we breathe, you know. And so I guess in closing, that's what I would like to share. And I appreciate your work and your service. And I can't wait to get back in the building so I can just you know, see, you know, have lunch together again, you know.
We agree. And thank you so much, Representative Christie, for being with us, for your work on the Social Equity Caucus, for bringing this forward. It's greatly appreciated, and we look forward to partnering with you as we try to do better work for all Vermonters. So thank you.
Well, thank you as well, and I really appreciate your time.
Yep, we'll stay in touch.
Yes, you as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, committee, I thought we would ask Ms. Carby to work with Jim Demaray and come up with language, perhaps looking at what other state boards of education look like in other parts of the country. You know, I'm thinking Massachusetts has, I believe, a lively state board. Do they have a statement with regard to diversity and inclusion? Perhaps other states do or don't, but if we could get some language and modify that statute so that we would be moving forward and creating a board that, again, is more diverse. I think that I'm just looking around. Is the committee comfortable with that as a step, Senator Perchlik?
Yeah, and I don't know if diverse encompasses everything, probably does, but I wondered about, do we want to talk about the gender balance as well as other, you know, racial balance, or are there other, you know, other things that we want to think about? But
yeah, I thought I would look at what, I mean, I started looking a little bit at what we have in some statutes and in some bills that are moving right now as well. I think what Representative Christie was mentioning, that several of the attorneys and legislative council have been drafting sort of similar types of language since it's become more of a focus for the legislature. I think we can come up with some around racial, cultural, and gender diversity, or things like that might give some latitude about what diversity looks like and not being prescriptive as far as what constitutes diversity.
Jeannie?
Yes, Senator.
We have this on the agenda for, again, on Wednesday, is it?
We have the vote on the Secretary of the Agency of Education on Wednesday.
Would you put on Wednesday have Mr. Demaray back in to look at language related to the State Board of Education makeup? And does that feel okay to you, Ms. Carby, Wednesday to between you?
Yes, I'll fill Jim in, and we'll see how he wants to handle it. But
Okay.
Yes, one of us will be here.
Great. And if not, if it's another day next week, whatever works for the two of you. Committee, that feel okay as a next step? I also think I will work with Jeannie to invite our 2 new nominees to the state board in. I don't know if, I don't remember when I was on Senate Ed if that happened, but I think it's a good thing to start. And Jeannie, if you would, you and I can talk afterward about extending invitations to the members of the State Board of Education, the new appointees. Senator Lyons.
But that's not, we don't have an obligation to confirm the state board. That's what I'm understanding.
No, you do.
Yeah.
Oh, we do.
Right, there,
Ah,
right, there is a
okay, well, I
requirement.
wasn't clear on that. So, you know, absolutely, they should come in.
The
I
appointments are subject to the advice and consent of the Senate. The issue is
Yeah, of
whether the
course.
members could be filling their roles and, you know, have been sworn in and serve in their
Okay.
roles prior to your consent. And
And
that's
just-
where I think the answer is yes.
That, I mean, that happens so often and it's just so difficult, isn't it? But, okay.
And just for clarification, I was notified that these 2 individuals are filling the terms of 2 individuals that have fulfilled their terms. So it's not a midway interruption vacancy. Peter Peltz and William Mathis both had finished their time. And these are 2 new appointees that would fill 6-year terms.
Can we get a full list of what the board looks like? Who's on the board?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
We'll have,
It's on the-
what's that,
Huh?
Senator Persley?
It's, sorry to interrupt. It's on the state board website. But one thing they don't have on there is the term. So you don't know if they're
Yeah.
1 year away or
Well,
5,
that-
6 years away.
And that also makes it really difficult if you talk about diversifying a board. You don't know whose term is up when, and then
Yeah.
what the continuity of that diversity is. If so, anyway,
We can have that. We can have that on Wednesday when we look at this language. Senator Hooker.
The list is on the website and the terms are there.
Oh,
The
okay.
term is listed, and that's how I saw that Mr. Jebsen and Mr. Lovett have 6-year terms.
Okay. I'll ask Jeannie to just send that around to the committee so everybody has it at their fingertips.
The question I had was which are the students, but I'm assuming it's the ones whose terms are coming up rather soon, or ending rather soon. But that may not be the case either.
So the language of the statute is a little bit different around appointments requiring advice and consent of the Senate. I don't think it for regular appointments that are not to fill vacancies, meaning somebody left in the middle of their term. It says that appointments, so let me look into this a little bit. Maybe I'll talk to the secretary. Some of it is tied into particular types of officers appointed with advice and consent of the Senate, et cetera. So. But in general, the appointment is made in February and the term begins on the first day of March. And then there is the language around the Senate confirmation, which is supposed to occur. You're supposed to confirm at any time during the regular biennial session of the General Assembly. So.
Great.
So it's a little different, but I think the result is the same.
And I think in different committees that I've served on over the years, sometimes these confirmations are done by, there's a confirmation done by phone call, quick conversation, and then they end up on the calendar and we approve. And I think what we're taking the step here to do is to, as I just wrote to Jeannie, to have our 2 nominees in on Thursday to hear from them, get a sense of their interests, their backgrounds, what they would like to do, and how they see their role in advancing education in the state of Vermont. Anything else on this topic? Okay. Thank you all. If we could shift gears, we do have one more agenda item to take up, and that is reviewing the language that Mr. Desmarais put together on S100. Ms. Carby, thanks again for being with us to do this. Senators will recall we are working toward we also, I should mention, have Ms. Parker here from Joint Fiscal to share a fiscal note. We're working with our friends in Senate Ag to get to a comfortable spot on an amendment that we would likely vote on the middle of next week and probably have on the floor toward the end of next week or the following week around universal school breakfasts and how that would work. And so we had met with Mr. Desmarais on this earlier in the week, and there is language now that we are going to be taken through by Ms. Carby. And we have not brought language forth into Senate Ag because our committee hasn't had an opportunity to look at it. So my plan is to, if we can get to a point where we're getting close to advancing something, would bring it in sometime probably on Tuesday. Senators may recall that our hope is to have both committees co-sponsor an amendment. So with that, Ms. Carby.
Great, thank you. Again, Jennifer Carby, Legislative Counsel, and this hopefully will work out perfectly because I have the language to walk through, and then I will jump over to another committee and let Brianna talk about the fiscal note, and then I'll come back. Does this committee like to put the language up to look at it, or do you?
I think as long as we have it on our site, and I think we do, I think we're okay just following it on our iPads.
Great, okay.
Thank you.
I will, sure. I'll put you both up. Okay, so this is right now an amendment from not sure who yet, but it would be a potential strike all amendment to the appropriations report. This is for S100. And it starts out with a revised short title. So it would now be say that the act may be cited as the Expansion of School Breakfast and Lunch Programs Act. It gives the purpose of the act. So it's been revised to, or purpose has been added to reflect what's in the bill. So the purpose of the act is to provide universal school breakfast.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just don't
right.
see it on today's calendar.
No, I didn't see it either. I think Jim had sent it earlier.
Okay.
I said, I just want to know if it's draft 2.2 from April
Yes.
8th.
Okay. So
Because you can find it under Bill. If you look under Bill, you'll find it.
Okay.
I got it. There it is.
it might be on also Thursdays. Yes. So it is under Thursday. And we said draft 2.2?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Senators, has everyone found it on Thursdays? Senator Persick, did you find it?
I can't get the page to load, but I'll have it open in a second. I'm sure it's there.
Thanks. Okay.
All
Senator,
right.
Go ahead.
So it gives the purpose of the act to first provide universal school breakfast for all public school students at no cost to the students or their families, with funding provided to school districts from the Education Fund. And second, to establish a task force to advise the General Assembly on how to achieve the goal of providing universal school lunch for all public school students at no cost to the students or their families, thereby making school food programs universally available to all public school students at no cost to the students or their families. We get into the statutory changes. This is in the school food programs subchapter. The first, I think there are no changes or only editing changes to the definitions. And then in award of grants, which is 1262A, Jim has added a new subdivision designation and changed terminology to reflect that because he's added a new subdivision 2, which starts on page 3. And that says, from state funds appropriated to the agency for this subdivision, the agency shall reimburse each school district that made available school breakfast to students at no charge, under a provision we'll see coming up, for the cost of each meal actually provided in the district during the previous quarter, to the extent that cost is not reimbursed through federal funds or other state funds. So this is the new sort of expansion of the school breakfast and directs the agency to reimburse the districts for that. Reimbursement amounts paid under this subdivision 2 would be paid from the Education Fund and would be added to the adjusted education payment receipts paid under section 4011. Then there's some changes in the food program. The first one I think was in an earlier version that I actually walked through with you last month. This requires each school board operating a public school to cause to operate within each school in the school district. So not just in the school district, but within each school, a food program that makes available school breakfasts and lunches to each attending student who qualifies for those meals under these acts every school day. And it directs the school districts to maximize access to federal funds for the cost of the school breakfast and lunch program under the community eligibility provision, provision 2, or other provisions under those acts. And then in addition, it requires each school board operating a public school to cause to operate within each school in the district the same school breakfast program made available to students who qualify for those meals under the National Child Nutrition Act to each attending student every school day at no charge. In operating the school breakfast program, the district must seek to achieve the highest level of student participation, which may include any or all of the following: providing breakfast meals that can be picked up by students, making breakfast available to students in classrooms after the start of the school day, and collaborating with the school's wellness community advisory council in planning school meals. And then it has as the goal of the state that by the year now 2023, school boards operating meal programs would purchase at least 20% of all food for those programs from local producers. And then this annual report that the school boards submit to the Agency of Education on their meals programs must include an estimate of the percentage, and then it adds of the cost of locally produced foods that were purchased by the school board for those programs that were locally produced foods during the 1-year period ending on June 30th of that year. Then it takes out, and I think this was in earlier versions as well, takes out or would repeal an existing provision of law allowing a district to opt out of school meal programs for a year. That would continue to be repealed. Then we get to section 4 of the bill, and this makes a change in the permissible uses of the education fund monies. This makes it allowable to make payments required under subdivision 1262AC2 of this title for school food programs, and that is that universal school breakfast provision. Then we have some additional provisions. The first one is on school meals consumed during class, and it directs school districts to count time spent by students consuming school meals during class as instructional time. Section 6 is a to be determined appropriation from the education fund in fiscal year 2022 to provide that reimbursement to the school districts for school meals under the universal breakfast program. Section 7 is in here, it's my understanding, is kind of a so that it's not forgotten. This has to do with the calculation of the statewide education tax yields and the recommendation of the Commissioner of Taxes under 32 VSA 5402BA, that calculation for fiscal year 2023 would take into account the increased costs under sections 1262A and 1264 of section 3. And this may be part of what Brianna is going to talk about in the fiscal note, but I think my understanding from Jim is this section is not needed if you continue to have this take effect on passage. But if you push this out a year, this language would be important to make sure that this information is not forgotten.
So may I just pause there for a moment? Was that in the original bill, this section 7?
I don't believe so. I think this was something that the Joint Fiscal Office had recommended adding so that this information or so that this calculation, the addition of these increased costs into the calculation is not forgotten if there's a year lag between when this takes effect and when it's enacted. So if you delay it by a year.
Okay.
There was concern that this might be, I think, forgotten in the interim. And I see Mark has popped up too.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
All right, so I'll finish going through and then I will leave you with the fiscal folks for a bit. Section 8 is a report. It directs the Agency of Education to consult with school districts, Hunger Free Vermont, the Vermont School Boards Association, the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Vermont Association of School Business Officials, the Vermont Principals Association, and the School Nutrition Association of Vermont. So consult with them on the impact of this act. And then by December 15th, 2021, report to the committees of jurisdiction. So this committee and the House Education Committee, the Appropriations Committees, and the Agriculture Committees on the status of implementation under this act. Section 9 creates, and I think you've seen this before, a new position in the Agency of Education, a full-time classified position specializing in the administration of school food programs. And that position would be transferred and converted from an existing vacant position in the executive branch. And the bill appropriates to the Agency of Education from the general fund for FY22 the amount of $100,000 for salary, benefits, and operating expenses. Section 10 is a task force on universal school lunch. So it creates this task force to make recommendations on how to achieve the goal of providing universal school lunch for all public school students at no cost to the students or their families. The task force would be made up of the Secretary of Education or designee, Secretary of Human Services or designee, and Secretary of Agriculture or designee. Directs the task force to make recommendations on how to achieve the goal of providing universal school lunch for all public school students at no charge to the students or their families, and to perform the following tasks.
If
To
we could just
recommend, yep.
pause. I'm sorry there for a moment. Senator Terenzini, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Not a problem. Thank you, Senator Campion. Jen, the $100,000, is that so essentially that's a new government position we'd be creating, and that would be, for the rest of time or as long as the program is in existence. Is that my understanding?
That would be my understanding, but I think the information in the fiscal note will probably give you a better sense of how that will work. But the way this is created, it's not a temporary position, it's a full-time classified position. So that suggests it's an ongoing expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
And then related to that, and this might be a question for Ms. Parker, but I wouldn't mind it answered right now if you don't mind. With the literacy position, we ended up using ESSER funds for 3 years to get that position up and going, with the intention, having spoken with the chair of Approps, that it then would likely, we hope, would become a general fund appropriation. Could we do the same with this? In other words, you use ESSER funds to get the position going for 3 years and then transition?
Yes, thank you, Senator Campion. Brianna Parker from the Joint Fiscal Office for the record. And yes, that would be a possibility. And I do believe in previous drafts of this bill, that was the funding source that was used for the position. And I believe this was a change in this draft. So I think that's a possibility if you guys are interested in doing that.
Please, Mr. Pearl.
I think that Brianna is correct. I just think you would need to make explicit the link between the coronavirus outbreak and the need for the position.
A lot
Okay.
of people without food.
Yeah.
Right, but is that pandemic related, and does it continue at the end of 3 years? So,
Senator Perswick?
Yeah, I have a question on the wording of the bill. And we use the term universal in here quite a bit. Well, not that much, actually. But we talk about universal school breakfast or universal meals, but that's not defined. But it's always says like, that's providing breakfast at no cost. I was just wondering, does the term universal in this context have a meaning, or is it just kind of the term that people use so it's in here?
I think it's more the latter. I think where you can see where it's where it actually describes what would be happening. It's always about providing meals to students and students at no charge to the students or their families. I think it's just being used in some of the headings. But let me.
Right, and some of the headings in like the task force.
Right.
And also in the purpose of the bill, it says universal school breakfast, but then it explains what that means is just providing breakfast at no cost. So I didn't know it seems like it's an extra word that, but I'm okay with it in there. I just wondered if it meant something else or meant something to some people.
Good question.
Right. I don't think so. I think it's generally being used as kind of a shorthand in places where it doesn't impose obligations. But we can certainly look at making changes to that if it feels uncomfortable.
I'm comfortable, just weird, I think.
Okay.
Senator Lyons.
So my question is going back to the position, because I was actually reassured that it wasn't a new position, because it said it shall be transferred and converted from an existing vacant position in the executive branch. One of my questions is, where is it coming from? That it would be interesting to know if it's coming from the Agency of Agriculture or the Agency of Human Services, or where. So, but if it's already there and there's ongoing money put, that goes forward with it, I'm less concerned than having another new position.
So I'm going to I think the JFO folks probably have a better handle on that than I do, and I need to run off to Commerce.
Oh, yeah, yes.
So
Thank you very much.
I will be back to finish it.
Okay, I think you've largely covered it, but yes, it'd be great to have you back.
Great. See you in a bit.
Yep, thanks. Ms. Parker, Mr. Prohl, thanks for joining us. Appreciate the effort you put into the fiscal note. And I know I've seen it, so I suspect it's on our website. And so I don't know who best. Ms. Parker, would you like to take us through it?
Sure thing. Thanks so much. All right, so I believe it is posted on the website, and just to kind of start at the top here, this bill is going to require all public schools in Vermont to provide breakfast to all students at no charge to the students or their families. And instead, this cost will be coming out of the education fund. And I estimate the annual cost for providing public school breakfast to be between $6 million and $10 million per year. And the key reason why this is a range is because depending on how many students participate in the program or how many meals are actually served, that can significantly change the cost of the program. And so I used on the low end the average of what we've seen from the data in schools that currently have universal school meals. And on the high end, it is for the average daily attendance. So if all of the students in attendance were to eat the meals. So that kind of speaks to the range there. Another key point of this is that this is looking at the additional costs, because I believe, as you know, several schools already offer universal school meals, and particularly for breakfast, there are additional schools. So about 30% of students, based on our estimates, already have access to universal breakfast. So this analysis is really looking at the new or additional costs resulting from this bill. I'll maybe pause there for a second if there's any questions on the cost of the program.
Ms. Parker, I don't know if you remember this, but when you mentioned the data from schools that you looked at around the number of students that participated, do you have a percentage sense there? Like generally, yes. That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about 60% of students. And so I think that number is rounded up by about 5%. So it's giving us a little bit of a conservative estimate there. So we're looking at about 60% of students participating in breakfast at schools with universal school meals right now.
Great. Any other questions? Senator Terenzini, do you have a question?
A question or comment, Senator Campion, thank you. I hate to sound like that senator, but I hate to see the state government grow in terms of employees, and so that $100,000, as we just talked about, plus Senator Lyons referenced, I really want clarification in my mind, unless I'm confused, but I want clarification that that was going to be a position that it was just going to be a shift of duties for a current state employee versus hiring someone else. Especially, $100,000 when you include their benefits package and stuff is not a lucrative job, but it's certainly not, in my mind, would be more of a starting base for a state employee. It certainly seems like it would be much more when you figure $100,000 for this individual. So I'd imagine we could save the taxpayers some money by finding another state employee who could do this job by transferring their services. But that's just my 2 cents on it.
No, thank you for that, Senator Terenzini. And it sounds like from Senator Lyons' question and Ms. Carby's response, and that there's still some gray area around whether or not this indeed is a new position or if things are being shifted. Please, Mr. Pearl.
I think it's an existing vacant position. So the position was previously authorized and there's nobody in it. So it would be a new hire.
It'd be a new hire. But just in terms of Senator Terenzini's good question, these are dollars that if it's a vacant position, we've been spending these dollars. They're not new dollars per se.
No, I think it would be new dollars. I mean, the person in the position it's vacant. It's a vacant position. So although the position itself has been authorized, nobody's in the position. Nobody's holding the position now. It's vacant. In other words, it's an authorized position. Nobody's in it. They can transfer.
Is this like ghosted students, or is this sort of like, has anybody ever been in that position?
Well, it doesn't specify the position. It just says an existing vacant position in the executive branch of state government. So it could presumably come from anywhere. It's just some place there's an authorized position that doesn't have a person occupying it at this point.
And I apologize if I'm being obtuse. I'm just assuming that if it's when there's a vacancy in an office, somebody had that position, somebody had been paid for 5, maybe 25 years. And so it's been on the books. Right now it happens to be vacant. So you're filling that position, but it's been budgeted. We've been paying somebody to do something at that financial level for a long time, possibly.
Until it became vacant, yes.
Until it became vacant, yes. Thank you. Okay.
Yes. I will also add that the $100,000 includes the salary, benefits, and operating expenses as well.
Salary, benefits, and operating expenses. Okay.
Great. A couple other points that I wanted to touch on in the fiscal note. One of the issues that the Agency of Education has raised repeatedly in discussing the universal school meals at large was the concern of losing those household income forms that go to applying for the free and reduced price meals, which are foundational for many of the federal programs that the state accesses. And so one of the benefits of doing the breakfast only is that you maintain the incentive of free lunch for families so that they will continue to fill out those forms so that the Agency of Education continues to collect that data, which is really crucial for many of the programs. And so that's another kind of aspect that I wanted to include in this analysis and highlight as an important point as well.
Thank you for that. And that has come up.
Yes, indeed. And I believe we kind of touched on this earlier, but in this fiscal note, I added in a little bit more clarity just around the use of ESSER funds. And so really the key distinction here that I want to make is one, that yes, all ESSER funds have to be tied to COVID-19 in some way. And that the reason why we cannot use ESSER funds to kind of phase in the program or cover any of the costs of the meals is because of the federal regulations tied to Provision 2 or the community eligibility provision, which are the federal programs that enable schools to have universal school meals, even if it is only breakfast. Those two provisions both have language that states that the difference in cost to offer universal meals must come from a non-federal source of funds, meaning that they have to come from a state or local source, which is the key reason why we can't use those ESSER funds. So that's for the meals portion, but I do think that there could be room to use the ESSER funds for the position, especially in those years when the ESSER funds are available. I think that Legislative Council would be the right person to talk to about how to, provide the correct documentation to show that link between COVID-19 and this program. But that would be the key constraint of using the funding there.
Thank you for that. And it reminds me that there, of course, is a direct connection between literacy and COVID, as we've heard, students' summer loss, academic year loss, all of those kinds of things. So I appreciate that very much. And I will indeed talk to Ms. Carby about making that connection. Any questions for Ms. Parker or Mr. Peralt? Any final comments, Ms. Parker or Mr. Peralt, on this?
I think I'm all set if you guys have all your questions answered. Otherwise, I'm happy to help in any other way.
Thanks. You've been terrific. And I don't see any other questions. So I think we're okay.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you both very much. Good to see you. Have a good weekend.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So committee, Ms. Carby will come back, but we at 3, but we do have a few minutes before we just take a little break around, is this the direction where committee members are feeling comfortable in general to continue to work on this language and share this idea with Senate Ag on Monday, knowing that personally what I'd like to see, 2 things added. I would like to see more, and I'll work on this weekend, I'd like some substantial findings to be put in this as it relates to the breakfast itself. In other words, we did hear anecdotally that universal breakfast can really make a big difference with getting students there on time. Both low-income and middle-income families tend to use school breakfast. The 60% that Ms. Parker mentioned, and just also the communal experience. And I mean, it sounds kind of old school, but it is, very, the most important meal of the day. And having, Vermonters having, taking advantage of our local farms, having eggs, having fruits and vegetables, just that experience feels good to me in terms of also the connection between good food, good nutrition, and academic performance. Senator Perchler.
So I found myself getting lost in the weeds down a little rabbit hole about the word universal meals. And so I wonder if we want to define it, if we mean it as something other than just free meals. There is a thing, another whole thing called universal meals, which is about what's in the meal. It's like a nutrition program, which we're referencing. So, and USDA doesn't really refer to it much, but it does seem to be just this synonym for free. But I wonder, maybe I'll check with Hunger Free Vermont, because it seems like it's the word they always use, but does it mean something different? Is it just that it's free, or is there something about universality that anybody, because they don't have to fill out a form or something like that. So sorry to take the time on.
I think it's a great question, and we don't, I think defining it and understanding it as best we can is smart. Senator Lyons.
Well, so while he was going down that rabbit hole, I was in another one. so maybe we'll end up in the same little.
Somewhere they connect.
Yeah, I know. So, but I was thinking, what about giving it a name? Like something like Fresh Start or Fast Break, breakfast, Fresh Break, Early Break. I don't know. Fresh Start, a program that is unique and different and suggests something neat for the state. That's all.
Completely open to that.
But I think the other question about universal is probably more important. And so.
But
My rabbit hole had a little dead end.
No, I think you bring up a really good point in terms of, Vermont takes steps all the time that I feel are the right things to do. They're the right priorities, great values, and they just coincidentally also bring new Vermonters in because,
There you go.
And having this kind of, Lions marketing company thinking about that, I think it's smart. I think it's who knows, we might come up with something. Anything else at this point? Otherwise, we'll take a break. We'll have Jen back for about 15 minutes and we'll finalize some things and make some adjustments to language, raise these questions with her, and plan to share our work with Ag on Tuesday. It is a little bit of a back and forth, but I think that since I think everybody's comfortable with the timing on this, so we'll take the time we need and hopefully maybe get something voted out middle of next week. It's great. Okay, so we'll see everybody a little bit before 3. Thanks. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Senate Education. It's 3:25 on Friday, April 9th. We've got some scheduling with Ledge Council that we're working on, so I think we're going to adjourn for the day, understanding that I'll work with Ledge Council to connect ESSER funding for the first 3 years of this appointment for the Universal School Lunch, Universal School Meals position, Universal School Breakfast position in the agency. Work with Ledge Council on finding more findings that support our work, and then also have them explore the word universal and give us a definition and some additional information on that. Anything else? Remember, we're not voting on this yet. We're only bringing it to our partners in Senate Ag on Tuesday morning, and I'll represent where we're at. And this gives people an opportunity for us to continue to work on it, get their feedback, and the plan would be sometime next week to have a vote. I do want to mention one other thing that I saw in the draft was that we identified Hunger Free Vermont on the committee that would advance universal school meals. And I don't remember the legislature identifying organizations like that in statute. So I will ask Jen about that as well. Not against it. We ask people, we ask representatives sometimes from different organizations, and it just might mean that we broaden that and say a representative from a nonprofit working for toward these kinds of goals. I'm not sure, but that's just one thing I want to make sure. I'll ask Ledge Council. Anything else from anybody else? Okay. Yeah,
I did.
Yes.
I'll just let you know, I did send an email to that group, to a nonprofit working on these issues, to ask them about the universal, like are all universal meals free, but not all free meals universals? What I'm wondering. Yeah.
Thanks for that. So if you happen to get anything over the weekend, if you would just forward it to Ledge Council and me, that would be great. Okay. I appreciate everybody. Thanks for your flexibility. We'll need it going forward, and have a great weekend. And we'll